everyone's having a useful and informative day. As explained, my name is John Elledge. I've been editor of Education Investor magazine for 3.5 years. Education Investor covers the entire education sector here in the UK from a business perspective. So we cover everything from nursery chains right up to professional training, and we cover suppliers as well as direct providers of education. So obviously technology is a key area for us. We spend a lot of time writing technology-based stories. We've written about companies that have done very well. We've written about companies that have done perhaps less well. And in the case of those like Promethean World, we've written about some who've done both. So obviously we're very interested in the topic that's under discussion for today, and it's very good news for us and very interesting news for us to see that so many people are becoming interested in investing in education technology. I'm going to introduce our panel now. I'll work from this end. At the far end we have Danny Rammel, who's Managing Director in the London office of Providence Equity. He's, among other things, a Director of Study Group and Galileo Global Education. There's also one there that's Turkish, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce, I'm afraid. Digiturk, that's the shortened version. Here we have, Here we have Hervé Marché, who's Chief Technology Officer of GEMS Education, which, as I'm sure we'll all know, is an international private schools chain based out of Dubai. On my left, we have Stefan Bayer, who is co-founder and chief executive of Berlin-based startup Sofa Tutor, which I believe is one of the shortlisted for today's EdTech 20, is that correct? And last but not least, we have Scott Sage, who is an associate at DFJ Esprit. Prior to that, he worked in London-based markets in business development and marketing. I do have a number of questions I'm going to put to the panel, but I'm going to start in a slightly cruel fashion by asking them to each give us a sort of brief opening statement as to what they've learned today and how they see the market as a whole. Perhaps I could start with Danny.
Sure. I think we're one of the largest investors in education, whether it's online or on campus. And some of our investments include Blackboard, other investments include groups of universities. So for us, EdTech is an important topic. I think this is one of the first interesting initiatives in Europe. So far, we've been spending a lot of our time as global investors investing in education-related, online-related education assets in the US, and we're starting to feel that there is an emerging trend and of interesting assets in Europe and a number of innovations that are going on and gathering pace. And it's very much driven by really utilization and bringing people together, and this is something that we really welcome. So that, I think that's for itself is a first thing that we appreciate. I think the other thing is there's a lot of fragmentation in Europe. Every jurisdiction will have its own curriculum, regulation, players, economic models, and exposure to public policy or public versus private budgets. So I think, again, bringing people together from a number of European markets to exchange is very interesting, especially for us as investors, and who try to figure out where is an interesting opportunity to back. So I think these are, I would say, are two big learnings. I think that the third one is really that it's important for us to exchange on going forward. How do people in different levels of investments, early days or more advanced stage investments, how do we look at various opportunities? We typically look at more established businesses as investors, but we operate and own portfolio companies that can invest in early stage, and we work with that. So that's, again, some background on how we look at this.
Fantastic. Hervé, if we could perhaps go to you next.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. So I think, it was very interesting today, learn a lot of things. Few comments maybe is that, it's not from me, it's that technology is technology for the one that were born before the technology. So I think that half of the technology we talk today are not technology for the learner. So that's something that we need to consider very often when we interact with kids, because it's their normal life, so there's nothing about technology. I learned today that, and we have that at GEMS, and I was with Apple for 12 years, so I kind of enjoy also the presentation of Microsoft now, that I'm a user of Microsoft. And I think that should we educate the parents? So should we use the technology to educate the parents? Because I think that to involve the parents within the learning is very important. So I learned today that everybody agree that if you have good parents, meaning parents involved in your education as well as a good teacher, you are more chance to be successful. And I think that technology should be part of it. And I don't see a lot of startup towards these things. So in terms of investment, I think it's a good idea to look at it. Then I think that we see a lot of things about, what was library before. So we are using technology to library. So that's something also we need to look at. And maybe, so I've got too many things, but I'm going to be very provocative. And one of the things that I learned from all of these conferences is that we always look at renowned, very well-known institutions, and we are in one of them. But for me, they are the past. And the kids, how we are going to recognize them, it's not maybe that we need to always look at what was the big names. It's what are the big guys or the big guys, the American way, not the English way, so male and female, that of tomorrow that will definitely make a difference. So maybe it's not to have the best diploma that counts, it's to achieve your life and be successful for yourself with your life and for the others.
Okay, personally, what was great today was that I met Anthony from TWIC and Simon from Math Doctor. So we took a picture of the 3 game changers of the K-12 afternoon market, and maybe in 20 years we're gonna look at the picture and say, wow, look at your hair back then, back in the days. But what I observed was that if you talk about education as a whole market, that's probably not it's probably not a market. It's very fragmented. There's K-12, there's higher ed, there's B2B. You can probably do different conferences on each topic that would probably be very focused. And what I also observed was that we talked a lot about products and what would be great to build and who could use it. But we haven't talked a lot about the demand side and who has the budgets to buy and how much budget there is and how to market and so on. So talking about the pipeline, who asks for what, who's paying, who's willing to pay, and what is actually the product. We covered mostly the product side today, I think.
Hi, I'm Scott Sage. I'm from DFJ Esprit. We're a pan-European early-stage venture capital fund. So I'm on the complete opposite side of the spectrum from my cousin on the end of the table. We're investing into really early-stage products, companies that are typically born out of necessity from entrepreneurs who discovered a pain point and wanted to scratch that itch, if you will. One of the things I've learned today is that we're still in a period of what I guess Michael Horn and Clay Christensen. Have you guys read Disrupting Class? A few of you, I highly recommend it. They've just come out with a new study which looks at a term that they called hybrid innovation. So just like we had electric vehicles, hybrids in between the old petrol-based and now new electric vehicles. Blockbuster, which went from sitting on everyone's high street or where I'm from, the end of the suburb, where you can go and rent your DVD. This is the hybrid innovation there was actually Netflix and LoveFilm shipping DVDs. And in fact, actually, if you look at the banking sector, we're going through a hybrid there where we have retail shops and still your mobile app. These are sustaining innovations that we're kind of in a hybrid where there isn't a solution yet where we've found the sort of mecca perfect solution for how each individual student or person can learn. So I think what 2 things I've observed today. One, this is the largest EdTech event I've ever been to in Europe. And probably the second I've ever been to globally. The biggest is South by Southwest EDU, and I think in terms of content and speakers and participants, this is great. So thank you to IBIS and edX's for pulling everyone together. And secondly, I think we're just about to feel the revolution of ed tech in Europe, like we've been seeing in the US. And I think that's born out of the demand side, like Stefan mentions, with entrepreneurs actually brave enough to try and take on some of the titans of industry that have dominated this sector for so long. So it's very interesting to see some of the really emerging early stage technologies that are starting to take hold in the market.
Thank you. I have just noticed an example of technology changing how we do things, is that I can now see the reviews we're getting as we're sat here talking, which is slightly uncomfortable experience, but we'll see how we do. I mean, on the face of it, there does seem to be a massive opportunity here, in that, you know, demand for education is one of those things that kind of feeds on itself. The more education everyone else has, the more education you need, which is unusual in terms of consumer markets. And we've got a massively growing global middle class in places like India and China, but all over the world. So education is very much in demand. Money to pay for it is not always easy to come by. So there's obviously an opportunity here to create new, cheaper systems for delivery. And yet, so far we've seen investors seem reasonably reluctant, in Europe at least, they've been reasonably reluctant to get into this space. So the obvious question, I think, is why? Why have investors been slow to take up this opportunity? Danny, perhaps we could start with you.
Sure. I think the first point I'd make on this one is there are lots of products and emerging technologies out there, whether in the US or in Europe. There is a lot of, we're now seeing a stage where we see an increasing amount of traffic and usage and increased penetration of usage. But what is still fundamentally, we see a lot of still free or freemium type of solutions and a lack of, clear business models, whether when you look at the kind of the interactions with pupils or the interactions with teachers or the various stakeholders. There are business models that are established with schools, but these are very different by country, and you end up with, a very fragmented economic model there. And as I mentioned earlier, exposure to public or private spending. And so from that perspective, we are very keen to invest in the space, whether directly or through our portfolio companies, for instance, in online education that we can tag into our on-campus-based education groups. But fundamentally, it feels like we're about to hit a tipping point on usage and penetration, and what will follow from that naturally is the emergence of robust business models on which people like us, and probably very different from the other end of the table here, would then feel comfortable deploying capital behind.
Scott, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, so what's really interesting, if you look at disruptive innovation theory, you have areas of non-consumption. This is why we're going through a period of having these hybrid models, because if you look at primary schools, elementary schools in the US, there's no non-consumption. If you grow up in the West, you go to school. Okay, so what is the disruptive model there? I don't know. Classes are now blended or flipped, but we're not going to have the disappearance of the classroom. Sure, the school is shifting and the responsibility of teachers and mentors is changing, but I don't think there's any, personally, I think there are very few areas in which venture capital investors can make money investing in really early stage K through 12 products, because there's really no necessity for a new product. I think if you look into middle school, sort of 7th grade onwards in the US, where you have more highly specialized subjects such as learning new languages, maybe like Hebrew or Mandarin, which where I grew up in Dallas, Texas, you could learn Hebrew, but you couldn't really learn Mandarin. We didn't have a Mandarin teacher. That's something that's being disrupted now by technology. We can have a video teacher in a classroom where I can sit in front of a computer and learn Mandarin, and then my teacher is no longer teaching me, they're an advisor or a mentor. So I think the kinds of product areas that we're looking into are building completely new products around completely new business models. I think Stefan's is a very interesting one, because in a way it's one-to-many through technology and eventually probably peer-to-peer if you look at the evolution of where his company may or may not be going. And so those are the kinds of things that we're looking for, and it's really hard to pinpoint where there's a systemic failure in the system. And And so we tend not to want to invest into areas where there's an incremental increase in innovation, because there's just a small incremental increase in your potential return. And unfortunately for us, at the end of the day, we're judged by our returns to our investors. So we're looking for new companies going after very large, global, untapped markets that are doing something radically different that a company like maybe a Pearson or a McGraw-Hill couldn't technically launch because it might be cannibalizing their own current suite of products. So it's a difficult one in Europe, and I think the demand side is unfortunately still rather weak. And my working hypothesis is actually that it might be that the education system here isn't that broken, and therefore doesn't necessarily need to be that disrupted by early stage technology.
Maybe I can add a little bit of the experience I had raising capital for Sofa Tutor. We've done it a few times, and the quotes I've gotten from VCs. I think VCs often say, well, it's probably going to take twice as long and going to cost twice as much money to get where you want to be on your business plan. And I think in other businesses like e-commerce, it's okay in a way. You know, there's going to be people who want to buy shoes, and they're going to buy shoes eventually online. So if it takes twice as long and twice as much money, that might be okay. And also, if you look at the advertising-driven businesses, social networks included, it's clear if you want to have lots of users, lots of engagement. Okay, in the end, we're going to have lots of page impressions, and there's going to be lots of advertising space to be sold, and there's people demanding that. So it's very clear that even though it takes longer, the goal is clear. You know that at some point you can monetize. While in education, there's not so many companies out there who have proven already that they can, in the end, when they've reached their goal, they can monetize. So I think it's a very German, very European point of view anyways, to look at the monetization side very quickly. But especially in the education sector, I've seen that view a lot too, and I can kind of understand this investor's view too.
Finally, Hervé, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I'm more on the other side of the panel, so I think it's a little bit different for me. What I see maybe that I can add is that the path of technology is not at all the same, and the speed of the change in the learning. So in terms of the curriculum, the standards, things are not changing. So if you're an investor, I guess that you think you can change the technology, you can bring technology, but then you need to convince teachers, you need to convince governments, you need to convince a lot of people that don't have the same kind of interest. Then you have, of course, and we see it with edX, we see it with all of these fantastic MOOC that at the beginning they don't need money, but still I think it cost 30 million for edX to create the content. It was paid half by Harvard and half by MIT, and now he's also looking for a business model to make kind of a revenue. So I think there is still a lot of confusion about what kind of money. Still, the money is taboo in education. I'm not sure it's easy. When I was selling for Apple the product, a lot of people say, expensive, it's not good, we want access for everyone, so we don't want to pay a premium. So I think there's still a kind of a disconnect. It's like a religion, maybe. So especially for mine in France, there's a disconnect between making money and bringing education. And I think that for investors, it's not so easy. So it's what I will certainly answer.
I think the MOOC example is an interesting one, because at one of our own conferences late last year, our keynote was given by a guy called Martin Bean, who's Vice Chancellor of the Open University. And he was describing MOOCs as the Napster moment for higher education. And I see what he's getting at, but I kind of at the same time couldn't quite get away from the fact that Napster didn't really manage to make the transition to actually charging for its products. So I'm wondering, we're hearing a lot of talk about sort of things like freemium models. Is that workable? Do people expect really good business plans to actually emerge from this sector at some point? Danny?
I think your example on higher ed is interesting. I actually don't. I think the MOOCs and similar freemiums for higher ed are interesting ways to expand the reach of certain institutions and generate an opportunity to make more money, especially for the private sector in higher ed, than to absorb an increasing demand and what in the end is a limited supply of higher ed spaces. But I think fundamentally one of the key barriers for higher ed is the accreditation and the fact that in the end people want a degree and want to be able to hit a placement position at the end of the road. And I think that still is something that's going to protect the classic model, I would say, of both online and on-campus higher education. And so that fundamentally is something that we see protected going forward. And if anything, over time, it's going to pan out as an opportunity for an expanded role of online and hence of the opportunity to monetize higher ed, proper higher ed content.
So I'm going to be provocative again. I think that there is no free lunch in life. So I think that MOOC is fantastic. I think there's a lot of great content. Most of it is marketing for the time being. So it means that it's for money. So it's a good advertising. I mean, iTunes U for Apple was the best example. It's free content, but it's fantastic advertising for the brand. Same thing for the university. If you look at the taglines, in the T's and C's, the terms and conditions of even Khan Academy, they say we reserve the right to invoice one day the content. So money will come versus this content. The things which I believe it's not for me the good discussion, because content, and I think that's one of the speakers said, content is one thing, but the learning path is what is important. What you do with the content is important, and that's certainly what people will sell later. So I will say that, yes, it's look free for the moment, but I'm pretty sure that one day everybody will find a good business model around that.
Is this one about freemium or free content? Are we talking? Okay.
I'm more interested in freemium.
Freemium. Okay.
I don't think you can entirely distinguish the two.
If I look at products, you can see products that have a very linear kind of learning path that you have to go through. And there's products where you kind of just grab the stuff, like you go to an encyclopedia and you just read an article or you watch a video, whatever you need, you go there and you just get this one content item. I think the linear products, you can turn them into freemium products because you can kind of let people start learning and at some point put up the payment wall or whatever it is and say, okay, this is how much you could do for free and now you have to pay. For example, language learning works like this. If you have a good language learning product, it kind of pulls in the user in the beginning, lets the user do the first kind of vocabulary test for free, and then after learning success came, then you start charging. Also, MOOCs could be something like this. If you are if you've already learned 30% of your artificial intelligence degree, yeah, you might be willing to pay if you liked what you've done, and you pay for the rest, the other 70%. At Sofa Tutor, one thing we do is we produce online educational videos, almost 10,000 videos today online, and they're very small. They are they're very dense. They explain one single topic out of the K-12 curriculum in detail, always one video. And we are like this encyclopedia. We've covered the whole school content, and people come to us when they have a real pain, when they really need to learn something for the test, the exam the next day. So our usage curve goes up during nighttime most of the time. And it's very hard for us to build a freemium product around that because the pain point is when the student really needs to learn something very quickly because the examination is coming up next day. So we've had a hard time creating freemium models, and we've done it with our mobile app. You get free videos on the mobile app, but I'm not so convinced yet if we're gonna start building on that. So that's my experience with freemium.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And the other time you would use freemium is when you need to build critical mass and build the largest site to attract the largest amount of supply to then get the most eyeballs, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you can't penetrate it any other way, and you're the biggest, and you can have huge gross margins, and then it's impossible to kill you. So our sort of fund in the Valley was an investor in Yammer, which Mark and Microsoft will know very well. They acquired them end of last year. They decided to build a freemium model around an enterprise tool because they realized that you no longer needed to go through the CFO and the CIO or the IT department to sell software. So the only way to go in free was to allow a champion within the company to install it, invite 5 friends from HR or business development, sales, marketing. And what Yammer could tell internally very quickly was monitoring the KPIs as soon as they could see what size company it was, and as soon as they hit a certain threshold, they would call that user, get some information, and that user would introduce him to 2 people on IT and then typically the CFO. And if they could hit that sort of critical adoption point, they would be able to sell into them. It's a good point with education. I don't know with MOOCs what the end game is. What we do know is companies like the University of Phoenix is spending $200 million a year on improving teaching. And if you compare that with how much Harvard and Yale and Princeton spend a year, I'd say they spend $0 on improving teaching. So I think the role of online courses, like it or not, probably will become mainstream and disrupt how we traditionally went to a classroom and had a very monolithic experience with a teacher at the front, sort of telling you how to do this and that. So I think, I don't know, it's really early days. It's definitely purely marketing right now, and it is definitely a big data game, but I don't know where it will end up.
Sorry, can I add something? But still, I believe that it was a fantastic, and I don't want again to be nasty with anyone, but I think that for a long time, lecturers didn't work a lot on their content. They were working on their reputation. I think that MOOC bring that they need to work a lot on their content. So maybe large universities don't pay to improve, but lecturers do have to improve themselves due to MOOC. So I guess that it's a fantastic kind of bonus for everyone, because the content needs to be much better because it's open to everyone.
I should say it's possible that I'm unduly cynical about freemium models, because I've spent the last 10 years working in an industry where we give everything away for free, and everyone's confident we're going to find a new business model any day now. I'm going to move the conversation on. I'd like to talk about why Europe seems to lag the US in terms of its capacity and indeed interest in backing early stage businesses. And I'm kind of interested in thoughts on why that might be. I think, Scott, you're probably the best person to turn to here.
Yeah, I mean, again, the working hypothesis that I think it's a function of 2 things. One, the ecosystem is still relatively new and maturing in Europe and in places like London, Stockholm, Dublin, Berlin, Tel Aviv, if you want to include them in Europe. And we haven't had the success that Silicon Valley, Boston, New York have had in churning out very large disruptive tech companies that are still these sustainable companies that employ several thousand people today. What happens when you have those kinds of successes is you have people leaving who've made a little bit of money but have learned how to scale a company from whether it's one of the first 10 or 20 employees and finding product market fit all the way through hiring 100 people every 6 months. You need those skills at every point along the curve. And it tends to be, if you look at the PayPal mafia in California or some of the big ad tech companies that have come out of New York. In London, we have kind of the love film mafia, I guess. Lots of people have started the next generation e-commerce companies. So it's kind of a lack of just deep technology talent and engineers who know that this is a space that is worth over $3 trillion, that is ripe for the taking and exciting. So that's why I think conferences like this are good, and hopefully we can do more to get engineers and entrepreneurs interested in this sector. And I mean, we closed our last fund 2.5 years ago. We still have 20 investments left to make, so we're very actively looking for new deals. I think as soon as we do find something that's disruptive, we'd love to pull the trigger and back and help companies grow here in Europe. So if you know of any, very happy to talk to you afterwards.
If anyone needs any money, Steph, what's your experience in the ecosystem?
I think I have to pass on the America versus Europe question. I didn't have such big troubles finding money. Really, it was okay.
At risk of giving you a chance to talk about how fantastic you are, why do you think that was? Why do you think you found it easy when so many people don't?
I think we started monetizing right away. That's good and bad because we had a product and we knew it would draw interest by the user's interest, but the whole DNA of the company was okay, guys, see if you can find a proof that people actually pay money for that early. Be a bit more conservative than the typical American startup. So that's what we did, and as we could show the numbers, that was convincing to a lot of people, because in the end it's an online subscription business. You see online dating, you see Netflix, Love Film, Spotify, other buy subscription, use as much as you want businesses like we are one too. You see the metrics, retention rates, conversion rates, cost per acquisitions, user lifetime values, and everything looked okay, I guess, to an investor. So I think that's all I can share.
Danny, you're obviously at the other end of the market, but how do
Yeah,
you
no,
see
I
the whole
think
thing?
the one thing I'd add to what Scott and Chris said is that, looking at the US market and from a demand and pricing perspective versus Europe, one other big difference other than the kind of fragmentation and the fact that you're only starting to have this kind of a crowd coming together is that pricing levels in the US are much higher. For what people charge to schools, for instance, in the US, for an online product is a lot higher than what we see in Europe. In Europe, people have established a much lower priced market than in the US. And so in the end, the monetization opportunity is a lot harder to achieve, scale with. When you couple that with the fact that the markets themselves are smaller, more fragmented on a national basis, you end up in a different place versus the US. I think this is kind of, pricing, I'd say increase prices if you can, because that will help, obviously. We say it all the time. So.
That's actually a good place to move on to another issue that I wanted to address, which is one of the things I find interesting about what IBIS is doing is that it is taking this pan-European approach, which I've not seen very much of. Now, I am aware that I'm the only Brit on this panel at the moment, so I might be fulfilling some kind of national stereotype here. But is there going to be an issue in trying to create sort of pan-European edtech champions? Because Europe isn't one country, it's 30 or 40 of them, each of which still have large amounts of their own regulations and laws and culture and so on. I mean, how plausible is it to kind of try and create Europe-focused giants? Hervé, do you want to come in on that?
So I will comment on a few things. First thing, I lived many years in the US, and I don't think the US is one country neither. I think it's an addition of states, and they are quite different education. So I may say that for me, it's not totally a barrier for European. Then I will answer to that point is that I believe that from Europe, we are always looking to cope with the US, and I think that there is plenty of other markets where we should play. And I'm in Dubai at this time after 1 year, and I think that the African market, there is a fantastic opportunity that we are living as European, to the US, to the Chinese, and European as talent, as opportunity. There are plenty of things to be done there. There is access to a lot of keys for education that are needed, where we can be, because we are cheaper, because I think that maybe we are also a little bit more social. We can bring education for less money, and we can certainly build some business model in partnership with some of the African countries. And I think that maybe we should not try to always compete face-to-face with the US and try to find some other places where we can do smart and good business.
Scott, I think you described yourself as pan-European. What's the...
I think this is a really fascinating question. One of my favorite products in the US right now is founded by two Brits, actually, that most of you probably know, called Class Dojo. And that's a product that's now in over 30 countries, and it's a team of about 10 software engineers and a designer and a very passionate CEO. And, their story was great. They went and met 200 teachers and asked them, what are your biggest problems? And classroom behavior was one of them. And they thought, that sounds pretty challenging. Let's go and try and build a tool for that market. And lo and behold, several months later, not having spent a single dollar on marketing and not having hired a sales guy, they're in 30 plus countries. And they built a product that teachers love using and that students like and enjoy interacting with, and that teachers hopefully one day, parents will get value out of. And they have, obviously a working hypothesis that they will either have to go district sales, which is obviously a very long and lumpy and difficult process where you need a fairly large outbound sales team and a great person to run that. Or, sorry, I know Alan Greenberg, by the way, I just realized who you were. You're like epic. Anyway, Alan Greenberg speaks very highly of you. I'm an investor into MediaCore. And secondly, they got the teachers to sell the product for them. So the products that we look at, from an investment standpoint, we obviously prefer models that are more capital efficient, where you don't need an entire 50-person inside sales team spread across 3 continents. But on the other hand, we do like products that are selling directly into schools, because we see the flattening of the hierarchy. In many cases with the charter schools in the US, for example, where they have slightly bigger budgets, they're adopting this Yammer style approach, where the teachers are bringing the technology in and working with a new procurement team that's in charge of purely just signing contracts and figuring out what makes the teachers more productive and the students learn better. And I came over here 8 years ago and got stuck, but my goal is to build very large companies in Europe. And if we can build companies that have, can hack the problem of shipping cross-border with e-commerce companies, I don't see why we can't hack the different curriculums and laws that we have internationally. So, my desire would be to help and back a company that could be the next Pearson out of Europe, and hopefully we can do that here in London. But I don't care where it is in Europe. I'm hoping that the edXis guys can hopefully have a shot at doing that.
Maybe if you look at the offline education market, you see Reed Elsevier, you see Wolters Kluwer, you see Pearson, Macmillan. That's international companies. So I think it's possible to do the same online as well. If you look at markets and where they overlap, you can definitely see all the kind of tools, learn management systems that you could take to other countries as well. But there's lots of competition in that field. If you look at, we've talked a lot about internationalization at Sofa Tutor lately, because what we've realized is that the private after-school market, the tutoring market, is actually, even though there's a national curriculum or even a federal state curriculum in each country, the underlying curriculum, the stuff people have to learn, is pretty much the same everywhere you go. Of course, there's differences, but we all need to learn what the sine function is, and differential equations are being taught in mathematics class all over the world. So, trying to build something that kind of spans all over these curricula is definitely possible. Which is why we are thinking about internationalizing what we've been doing in the German-speaking market so far. And according to the question, is it possible to build a European giant? Yeah, for sure.
Does language complicate things?
Yeah, it definitely does. It adds to the cost because you need to localize. You need to, at some point. I mean, if you talk about MOOCs, if you do a massive open online course for MBA students who are used to being taught in English, that's probably, then you don't have to localize your content. But if you do something for the K-12 market like we would do, then we would have to definitely invest in local, in the language thing. Yeah.
I'd like to ask now about where the panel sees which bit of education technology the panel sees the value sitting in, because obviously you have content, you have a platform, you have assessment systems. Where exactly does the value lie? Danny?
No, I think for us, and it's coming back to this point about why is there no pan-European champion on the edtech space. I think one of the biggest challenges for edtech today, at least from where we see it, is distribution. I.e., it's very expensive, whether you look at it on a national basis or a pan-European basis, to reach out to the large number of public schools, to teachers, to parents, etc. That cost of distribution, I think, is kind of a big hurdle towards monetizing the system and then generating more capital to back the ventures. And so I think where, at least my personal view is aggregation or aggregators of the various products that are out there who can operate and crack the distribution code is where I see value in the near term.
That's a very difficult question, because on one side you need the expertise to be good in what you want to achieve in terms of the content, in terms of the platform, in terms of all of the aspects. Then we have seen a lot of companies, and I don't know, it's true that for Pearson they are buying a lot of companies at this time, and I think the addition of company doesn't always make life easy. I've been in companies before where the acquisition of different companies. So I think that the easy answer will be that to be successful, you need to be, like you say, aggregating. So you need, everything can make a business. So everything can be successful. However, you need to shoot for the best. And I think that when you have the content, you need to have the learning part, you need to have the assessment, you need to have a good platform. So I think that the customer, the user, need to have a fantastic user experience. Now that if it came from 2 or 3 different companies, I think doesn't, me as a CTO, I'm looking to use the best for James' school at this time. So I'm not certainly going to take one player. I'm going to curate content with the best content I can find. I'm going to have people creating content for me with the best teacher I can find. Then I need a good platform, and maybe this platform will not be the same provider. So everybody doing a good job can make a revenue, can make a difference. I think it needs to be the best customer experience.
Where do you think the value lies in what Surftutor is providing?
I think, at least in Germany, I think in the UK it was the same. There was one big hype in educational technology a few years ago. It was digital whiteboards. These things that were being sold to schools, and now they're dusty, hanging there somewhere. No one's using them, which was the 2 problems. Teachers weren't really trained. It didn't really become part of their daily life to work, daily routine to work with these tools, and there was not a lot of content. I believe we have a lot of tools to supply. Like we have these iPads, we have laptops, we have computers, we have all kinds of stuff in schools, but there's not a lot of content. So I think good content would actually drive more demand for more platforms, for more technical devices, and so on, and would actually let teachers' imagination sparkle more. Cool, nice videos, I can use them here and here, or nice tests, I can use them in whatever. So I think providing more content would kind of like fuel the whole ecosystem with more ideas, and would actually let teachers kind of like change their mind on how much they use these devices in school in the future.
Yeah, I'd agree with Stefan, and I think the most important value that we can create now are tools for teachers that allows them to go back to freeing up their time to actually spend advising students and running experiments and A/B testing with the way that they control their classrooms. And I think we're probably stuck in this blended or flipped classroom model for the next, I'd say, 5 years until I'd love to throw a question back to the panel and see where they see adaptive learning platforms coming, because that's still relatively, it's truly in its infancy, but it's something that's really fascinating if you look at trends in technology with database technology and broadband technology. You can now have these in schools, so I'd love to see the impact that could have within the classroom. But I think it's tools that can make teachers more productive. Probably many of these tools haven't even been thought up yet. I still think we're still at an infancy in the ed tech space, and a lot of people have been discussing for the last 12 months, are we in a bubble? If you look at the size of the ecosystem and how fragmented it currently is, and some of the current investment hypotheses being made in the sort of later stage, then I think there are many years and many billions of dollars left to go in investing into this space. So yeah.
I think it's possible the UK sits in a slightly unique position in this market because it wasn't, I mean, the point Stefan was making about whiteboards, in the UK it wasn't just whiteboards, there were budget lines for assessment systems, there were budget lines for learning management systems and so on. And so all these schools now have about 4 or 5 different systems and they don't necessarily need them all. I think some of these companies are probably going to go out of business at some point. So we've got that to look forward to. We've not really talked about the role of data. I mean, I think one of the things that comes up a lot is that, you know, one of the advantages of this technology, you can kind of harvest data on the way kids learn, the way they progress, and so on. So I'm interested in knowing where the panel sees big data fitting into this debate. Hello.
Big data, what do you mean? Sorry, my English sometimes, I'm not sure. What do you mean by big data?
I mean the amount of information that you can collect on sort of the way and the extent of learning, and that you can then use to manage the schools and actually as well, you know, manage the way you move forward through the curriculum.
Okay. So I'm not sure that I'm a specialist on that. So I will. I'm a very honest person. So that's difficult for me to answer. I may say I will reverse the things and come back to some of the points. So maybe it will answer part of it. Is that we talk about the bring your own device, you know, this morning with the kids, and in fact they bring their own device, but they cannot bring their life because they cannot be connected to Facebook, they cannot be connected to Skype. So I guess that to answer to your question, I think kids, if they are engaged, they can play with a lot of data. So they can be multitask. I think I heard this morning that we can do one thing at once. I think that's us. But for most of the kids, they can look a video, read something, so they can do few things, so they can manipulate a lot of data. I think for the teacher, that's certainly different because they need to curate the data. They need to make sure that the data they are going to use is going to impact the kids, so this kind of disconnect. We are talking about this LMS, you know, that a lot of money have been spent in the UK, for instance, where each time you have a link with Facebook, it's cancelled. You cannot do it. So I think I'm not sure it's a matter of how much data you can bring, is to make sure that the data that you use are the data the kids want to use. And I don't know if it's answer to your points, but that's the way I will say it.
Danny, from the investor's point of view, how important is data?
The view is one of I'd say the issues of taking higher education as a sector is that it's a sector that tends to be quite, you know, supply constrained. There's quite a lot of demand, there is not enough supply, so what does that lead to is it leads to the lack of investment, i.e. people don't feel the need for making incremental investment. I think where big data will come to play as it progresses through the system is it will give a measurement of value add of certain incremental investments in education, and that's very abstract. You know, what is value add of one institution versus the other, of one course versus the other, when the path is relatively long and there are a number of, you know, classes and courses and steps and methods of delivery. So big data will have a big role, I think, in potentially supporting return on incremental investment in a more optimal way, and this fundamentally will probably lead to more investment in quality education and less kind of, you know, legacy business models, which is what we see today.
I'm aware that at some point I'm meant to be opening the debate to the floor a little bit, I think. So given the time, I think this might be the moment to do that. Does anyone want to address a question to any of the panelists? Go on, there must be someone.
One of the things that I think several people have mentioned about is that about brands and the position of kind of early stage businesses to break into this space. One of the things that'd be interesting just generally from the panel is that where do the existing brands kind of play in terms of the ones that are recognized in the space? how will they survive compared to the kind of earlier stage businesses who can break into the space and create new brands? And how long is that window of opportunity open for before new brands come in and actually hold the space again?
Scott.
That's an interesting question. I think, well, not to be biased, but Pearson's doing a great job of that. I mean, you either have a choice of, so you can innovate from within using your own data and having completed your own customer and market validation. You can wait until the market starts to take off and other companies, are typically startups, have some traction and you can take them out. Or you can do what Pearson's doing, which is the first, second, and third, which is you can also invest into funds that invest into those companies and be shareholders and have a view and typically either partner with them or acquire them later on. So I don't think there are too many threats to the incumbents in the market right now. It's still a pretty nascent and we're in a pretty early part of the cycle, I guess, looking at new products that are starting to take off. You know, globally, how many companies are turning over more than even $10 million of revenue in this space? Not too many that are growing more than 20-30% a year. I'd say very few, and most of them, I think Mark put up on a slide earlier, that have raised some serious VC cash. So, you know, for the startups, it's all about focusing on what we would refer to as your product market fit. You have a hypothesis, you build a quick version of your product, you throw it over the fence, you see how your customers react to it, and then you take that learning and you iterate and start to add more features to it and make sure that you've created a product that the market wants. And that's, you know, typically most products fail because the founders and the developers don't go out and speak to customers on what they actually need. So I think, you know, I think it'll be a long time before Pearson or McGraw-Hill, any of the large publishers, are feeling threatened by some of the startups that we're investing into. I don't know if that wasn't what you asked, but that's kind of how I interpreted the question.
Stefan, how quickly are you hoping to be a threat to Pearson?
It depends if we internationalize or not. Right now we are more a threat to Klett and Cornelsen, the big giants in Germany. And it also depends on how quickly the institutional market will flip and the digital textbook will actually be asked for from governments. That's when there would be a moment for us to go into that field and turn all the content we've already produced into textbooks that we could sell to schools and that are much more interactive than the PDF version of the printed textbook. But I see it, as Scott said already, as long as the big brands invest in other companies, incubate their own products, there's a good chance for everyone to win that race.
Yeah, no, I think from the technology or the LMS side of things, so we were investors in Dagboard, which is one of the largest legacy LMS operators. We've been, you know, over the last year and a half, we've actually been doing exactly that, which is investing in either directly or through acquisitions in innovative LMS or content providers, and, you know, providing that reach to 15,000 universities, over 20,000 schools. And so effectively we see that kind of core product, which is the core LMS, as a pipe through which to reach a wide range of end users. And that's the way that we are leveraging the innovation and combining it with the legacy product that have an established route to market and effectively cash flow.
No, I will say exactly the same thing. I think that we are in disruption. We are not in a revolution. So tomorrow morning, the market will be almost the same with some changes. So there is a parallel path for big company and small company to come. So definitely, I don't think that big company, for the time being, got a risk to disappear. And if they are smart and they help small companies, small disruptors, then they can go in parallel. So I'm in agreement with that.
One issue we haven't touched on so much actually is the issue of who who the best customers are from an ed tech firm in terms of the reliability of the business line. I'm wondering, Danny, when you kind of look at companies to invest in, are you more interested in ones that are consumer facing or sort of institution facing? Does it matter?
I don't think it matters. I think what really matters is the business model, and you can have successful business models selling to schools directly, to governments directly, and the cost of delivery of these examples will be quite different, or the cost of sales will be different. And so you need to look at the business model as a whole. Similarly, if you're selling to the teacher or the parent, again, you need to look at the pricing point and the cost of sales and see whether that's economical. I think this is what really is fundamental versus any preset or predisposed view on B2B versus B2C.
Scott, do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. And I think maybe the reason why some startups are trying to experiment with going direct to the consumer, which in this case would probably be the parents, is because they don't have the resources to go after selling directly into the district. A lot of young 20-something developers, when they launch a company, they don't realize there's a really short period of time where they can go in and sell to the superintendent of a district, and if they miss that period of a few months, then they actually don't have 9 more months of runway to sit there and wait for that window to open back up. So that's one of the interesting trends that we're starting to see is companies going direct to parents, and I don't know of any. I think Scientific Learning has experimented with a few products, but I don't think I can name any that have been successful yet. And going, maybe you guys actually.
We also sell to schools, but the main revenue streams are based on parents paying for their children. And it's a very opportunistic way to go where the money is at this point, and always have in mind that you can create some APIs and you can create content that can be used in other ways later on. Language Lab is doing it the same way. They're going to someone who really needs a distant learning solution, and that's someone who owns oil platforms. So I think that's very smart. As long as you build stuff that you can reuse, and you can just adapt to other use cases once the money is there as well.
We've talked a lot about higher ed and the K-12 market, but we haven't talked too much about the corporate learning market. And having done a bit of work on looking at opportunities, it seems to me that the corporate e-learning market is quite an interesting one from a potential consolidation play, because players are a bit bigger, already profitable, and it seems also quite scalable as a play. So I just wanted to get a feel for what the panel think about the corporate e-learning market.
So, from what I see, is the big question mark. The big question is it scalable? Because there's been lots of B2B e-learning activities in the early 2000s already that cost so much money that you could probably take all your employees, put them in airplanes, fly them to Ibiza, and have a great workshop there, and it's going to be cheaper than building an online learning product. What you see is it's very, very fragmented. There's lots of agencies who go to, let's say, Hugo Boss, and they say, well, you need to train your people in the stores on how to, sell the next collection. And then Hugo Boss says, yeah, we need to do that, and you need to build us that really shiny, cool platform that's Hugo Boss style, and you don't need to use Moodle or some other kind of learning management system. We just give you the money. So there's lots of fragmented products out there being built by agencies, lots of very proprietary content. So the big question is, are there scalable models out there? Are there markets big enough to really build a product that can scale? It's something I couldn't answer, but I would look at it from this angle.
This is all I've been thinking about for the last couple of months, because I haven't yet seen anyone testing anything in this space, but there are 2 areas I think could be interesting. One is selling, or I guess training your customers. So I'm thinking of a CRM vendor, Salesforce. How do they train their new Salesforce customers? I don't know if that would fall under education or not. That's probably more onboarding, customer success. The other area is training new hires. So whether they're college graduates who this is their first job in the workforce, or if this is the new VP of marketing, explaining your cultures and values and why we sell this way and blah, 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 blah. I don't know if that's a large market. I don't know what problem that's really solving. It's something I think about a lot. I haven't come across anything yet in that space, but if you know of any, I'd love to discuss it.
I think from our experience, how we're tackling this market is you're right. It's a very large, market, and you have a lot more dollars flowing around. There are two components. It's a very fragmented market on the basic, delivery, which is in person, and that's fundamentally fragmented by region, by city, etc., and by sector. So the level of fragmentation is multiples of the K-12 and the higher ed. And so, but we see that as actually an opportunity to create, a pan-European or US, Europe kind of scalable player in a certain vertical, and we actually have a vehicle to do that. And I think my impression is the next step following the consolidation of the traditional operators of B2B type of training operators is that, you then look to add in mostly through acquisitions, the online components to make it a dual delivery. And that will be a much more robust, defensible business model than, traditional only will no longer work, and online only, again, barriers to entry will be very, very low. And so, and cost of, again, selling will be high for them to be sustainable. So combination of both, and that's actually something we think there's an opportunity there.
I can add one more thing. If B2B also includes looking at content that you need for the workplace, it doesn't necessarily need to be B2B sales. It could be B2C sales. We see lynda.com, which offers great screencasting videos about the software you need to make money. So graphic designers go there because they really know that they can monetize what they've learned very quickly. They can make more money after they've learned that, or they can, accountants take the next Excel class and then they are better and they get more money as well. And we also see it in all that, in the whole computer science industry. Pluralsight, we've already heard today, I think. Treehouse, Code School, that's where people understand that if they pay, it's B2C relationship in the payment process, they can monetize their skills quickly in the workplace, and that's something to look at. That's very interesting.
So for you, Sofa Tutor, do you see an extension of your business model in the B2B place or in the professional place?
It's very tempting. It's very tempting to look at it and say, okay, since we've built this machinery to produce hundreds of videos per month, what shall we produce next? And the question is, shall we grow wider in the German-speaking market, or shall we just make faster horses even faster and say, okay, let's go international with a product that we already have? That's the big question for us right now. Yeah.
We've got just under 8 minutes left, I think. I can see that the room is now abuzz with questions. The gentleman over there, I think.
As a consumer moving forwards with so much competition, lots of content, a lot of redundant content doing the same things, how do you imagine I will start to discriminate to know which one is better than the other? Assuming they don't integrate themselves, how can I pick one maths course over another? What factors am I looking at? Is it simply people telling me in reviews and things that one is better than the other, or is there some other mechanism that can be used across these things that's meaningful in some way?
So I can answer, for James. So we do two things. We have, in fact, teacher creating content and some other teacher curate content. So that's the company that we are creating and giving, 2 or 3 of the best, what we think is the best content for the kids. So there is a kind of a specific job to curate content for the schools.
It's about making the decision on which language or which mathematics course I should take. Did I understand you right?
I'm trying to make a judgment and look at which factors I should use to weight my decision to choose one learning provider over another. Which factors are important for me? How do I tell the difference between somebody who teaches maths at Khan Academy and someone who's popped up and is doing the same thing?
what we actually see that if you are under pressure, if you really need to learn fast, you go for the branding argument. You say, I've heard good things about this and this company. I know that the last 10 hours before the test, I can invest in only one of these mathematics courses. So you go for the one that you've experienced before, that you've liked before, or that you've heard good things about, because what it should be about learning online is being more efficient. So there's not so much time to test around, at least for our target group, when they are under pressure.
But this is back to the point we were discussing earlier. Today there is no way, there is little by way of data and analytics for the consumer to measure value add of one versus the other. And so hopefully over time, with what people call big data, which is a nice word, people should be able to evaluate and benchmark, and you should be able to see, well, maybe some standard metric or some form of certification for all these products that are out there to be able to judge as a consumer. As an investor, we have the same issue as you, which is to say, well, if we see 10 content providers of e-learning, which one is better than the other? We don't have a way to measure it from your perspective as a consumer, so we end up looking at it from a usage perspective, and we say, okay, how is usage progressing, and which is the traditional e-commerce way of doing things, but that's only relevant for us as an investor, I'd say.
You should start that company.
Yeah.
You should too.
We have time for a couple more questions, but just to forewarn the panelists, I always like to end these things by asking everyone for a prediction for the future. So start the crystal ball gazing, please. Gentleman over there.
We've talked a lot about startups coming in and disrupting the market. What's the panel's views actually the probably most likely source of disruption will be a company from another industry pivoting into education? So I'm thinking of News Corps with Amplify, also potential Google and Apple moving into making education kind of more of a core market for them.
Anyone have a view on that?
I think a News Corp would go into the market and buy a company that's already profitable and say, okay, we're going to start from here, and that's going to be the core. From there, we're going to evolve. But starting an education product from scratch, when you don't have the expertise in-house, I don't think. And Apple, I would say, I don't know if that's still the case, but Apple would always probably say we are the provider of the tools, but we don't produce the content. We produce a Final Cut, and you can use Final Cut to produce great educational videos, and we produce an iBook author, and you can create great ebooks with that, but we don't produce ebooks ourselves. So I think it either comes from very naive teams, like we were one, who say, okay, we can do that, let's just start going, or it comes out of the big publishers themselves.
News Corps have done Amplify from scratch.
That's true, okay. Yeah.
The number of newspaper companies that have some kind of interest in education is very, very high. Does anyone else want to come in on that before we... Okay, gentleman here.
One thing that we haven't addressed here is the gap building up between pupils and students in their life and education in the classroom. It seems to be we seem to agree on that it's a problem in all countries that schools and governments are not early adopters. So who should get in? Jamie Oliver to drive this from a PR perspective, or how should we could expect more from the educational sector now. This gap is building up. So how do we handle this?
I mean, my personal view is that the markets will take over and be effective, and obviously I would say this, it sounds ridiculous, but I think startups will be the ones to come in and make a radical change if there needs to be a radical change. We know that the education system is very slow to adopt. They don't have the biggest budgets in the world. They can't move very quickly. So if someone can come in with a tool that's more effective, more productive, more cost effective, and you can, with data, show a real return on A, investment, and B, education, however that is yet to be defined, it seems to be the question of the day, then I think that's hopefully what will make that experience more effective. But of course, I would say that.
We're seeing this actually happen in higher ed in Europe, where, public enrollment is flattish, and private enrollment, or enrollment in private institutions, which are basically closer to industry, able to innovate in a combined online and offline delivery, and basically being more flexible in the type of courses they offer, are growing enrollment by 5 to 10% a year. So that shift is really happening, and I think it's accelerating. And to link this to predictions, that's clearly the private sector going forward is going to be a bigger driver of where enrollment is, whether it's in K-12 or whether it's in higher ed throughout Europe, and that there's a catch up here to be done versus the U.S. market, which is far further away from here.
Yeah.
Might as well roll forward with the predictions, I think.
I was going to add, because I came from private school background, and I can see the teacher make the big difference. So if I was answering to your question, I will say that the revalorization of the teacher job within the society is very important. And here you have a B2B opportunity of better training to the teacher to understand their way of acting now with the kids. The kids, they want, it's funny because the kids, they spend a lot of time on their own things, but within the classroom, and I visit classroom every week, they want collaboration. So they are alone at home, and they want to collaborate within the classroom. So I think that the teacher, they didn't find yet their way. So certainly, I think it's a good idea. We bring people that give a kind of another way to see at things. So Jimmy Oliver, or plenty of Bill Clinton, or some other people that came to the classroom. And very often they empower the teacher to do something different, not to try to give a lecture, but to come with the kids. And definitely here, in terms of technology, there are a few things to be done to better train the teacher so they understand the value of it. So that's certainly something, reevaluate the role of the teacher within the society, give them back an importance, but they need to play the game as well.
We are pretty much out of time, so I'm just going to go along the line. I'll start with Scott. I'm just going to ask everyone for one prediction about how things would have changed over the next 5 years.
I'm terrible. I'm really bad at these kinds of predictions. I'm always wrong. My one prediction is more of a B2B. I'm going to come up with a product, a sort of science fiction idea. I don't have to set my alarm, and my phone is going to automatically, using artificial intelligence, know what time to wake me up in the morning and tell me the quickest way to work. But the fascinating thing is when I get to work and I'm on my desktop, and don't look at me like that, I know this is ridiculous, my computer's going to tell me what I need to learn that day based on the adaptive learning platform that DFJ Esprit has put onto our server, and is going to tell me that I need to learn more about the legal documents that we're signing with a joint venture, and that I need to focus more time on my financial statement analysis and learn these new, Monte Carlo situations. And yeah, that's terrible. Sorry, I'm really bad at these things.
One prediction is that there's going to be a consolidation of the European education market, and there's going to be 70 million euros flushed in the market. That's, I hope for sure. And then I hope that there's going to be more cooperations between the textbook publishers, the big players, and the startups. Just letting up test balloons, see how they fly. That would be great to kind of like build cases that can create the data that convinces politics in the end as well.
I think I predict that we should not have anymore, Europe as such. We should have continent, and I think that technology will help to have the kids within different countries, different continents, to exchange and learn together. And I think that some of the investment you should be doing, with the money that you want to spend, it's really to help access to education to everyone all over the planet, and it will certainly change what's going to happen if we don't do it.
And Danny.
Yeah, I think I hinted at it earlier, which is the role of the private sector. And I think if I were to predict over 5 to 10 years, we'll see a lot of governments actually putting good universities and good schools for sale to the private sector. which may be a more efficient operator and innovator actually in the system.
And the panel will reassemble at EdTech Europe 2018 to see who was right. Thank you very much to all our panelists, and thank you.